Man, you might not care about Charlotte Corday right now, but I'm telling you, once Lost Belt 6 comes out, you're definitely going to care, and you just might consider throwing some grails her way if you're not already doing that already, because, I mean, let's be honest, she's pretty hot. Like, that's the whole reason we're all here, right? We want to make sure this absolute baddie of a servant is actually usable, and yes, she is pretty usable, I will say that for the most part. Her third skill is a little bit wacky, but everything else with her kit is pretty fine. She's not doing anything insanely crazy, but she's not doing anything bad, right? She's not any Guile Saber or anything. She's not a complete dud. But is she going to replace that 4-star Shiki in your box? Probably not. But then again, most of you guys probably don't have Shiki because there's a lot of new players coming in for the anniversary. So with that being said, in today's video, we're going to talk about Charlotte Corday and how good she is, why she's just overall worth leveling. But if you enjoy FGO content, I upload these videos every single day, and all I ask for in return is a like on the video and a subscribe to the channel. If you're feeling extra feisty, you can click that join button and become a channel member if you really like what I do and want to directly support the channel. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into this, starting off with her hits, which for the most part, I think her hits are pretty average. I mean, not the quick cards, because as an assassin, her star gen is pretty high at almost 25%. Although with her passive presence concealment skill, she probably is a bit over 25%. So her star gen is rather good with 3 hits on 2 quick cards. She can gen a fair amount of stars, especially if you get her in a Brave Chain where she has that 5-hit extra attack, which, you know, already means she's already off to a good start. Her NP gain rate, though, is pretty average with the hits she has. 52% with 3 hits on both of those arts cards. Again, you're not going to gen a lot of NP by just clicking these cards. You'll gen a decent bit, but you'll really get a lot of mileage out of these arts cards if you're getting crits on them. Which, thankfully, she's an assassin, she can provide her own stars. You can pair her with somebody like Caskill to make those arts cards into star gens as well. Overall, I think her hits are pretty average for an arts assassin, nothing too crazy going on here. Well, let's talk about her skills and kind of why I think she has everything she really needs but isn't doing anything super exceptional. So, her first skill is giving her 100% extra death chance for 1 turn, so you're obviously supposed to pop this when you pop your NP, because spoiler alert, her NP has an insta-kill chance on it, which if you're a newer player, you're like, dude, that's awesome. A 100% chance to insta-kill somebody? That's sick. I could just one-shot everybody. And no, that's not exactly how that works. With this buff to her insta-kill chance along with her NP, you should be able to insta-kill bronze and maybe even some silver enemies, but gold enemies usually have a very high insta-kill resistance, especially servants, because they don't want you cheesing those servant boss battles. In fact, you should basically consider most servants or like main bosses nigh unkillable with insta-kill mechanics. You should never even rely upon it. So sorry to like burst the bubble and be like, no, you're not really going to just go up to like Zeus and Lost Belt 6, poke him with the dagger and be like, I insta-killed him. Nice. That's not really going to work, but again, you can kind of cheese it with some silver and bronze enemies. But thankfully they slapped an additional effect onto this skill, so it's not just insta-kill. They actually gave her 2 hits of evasion that last for 3 turns. This skill is on a 5-turn cooldown, so the uptime on this effect is rather good, and it should give her some decent survivability, so that I do like. It's also nice that it's a survivability that's hit-based, but also lasts a few turns, so presumably when you click this skill to combine it with the NP, to try to insta-kill whatever silver or bronze enemy you're fighting, you don't waste the second effect because the evasion lasts a few turns. So at the very least, she's tying into her NP with her first skill, and she has some decent survivability. Her second skill is giving her Pierce Invincibility for 1 turn and a 30% attack buff for 1 turn, and buffing her debuff resistance by 20% for 3 turns, all on a 6-turn cooldown. Now, this skill is a little bit whack. The 20% debuff resistance is almost like, why even bother? That's basically what like most Lancer, Archer, and Saber class servants just come with built into them, right? So I guess that's kind of what they're going for. But again, this is going to be something that you pop with your NP to get that little bit of extra damage and to also get through any dodges or invincibility skills. Because we'll talk about that when we get to her NP in just a bit and kind of how you really can't run or hide from Charlotte Corday. But finally, there's her third skill, and this is kind of the whack skill that I was talking about, because 2 of these effects are ideal. The second one really, I mean, it's good, but it's not exactly what you want. So what it is you're either going to get a 30% arts buff for 3 turns, 50% crit damage for 3 turns, or 50% NP damage for 3 turns, all on a 5-turn cooldown. And no, it's not like all 3 of them have a chance to proc, you get only one of the 3. And you should be able to tell the one you don't want is the crit damage. I know it's like 50% crit damage, that's not bad. Again, for reference, that's Waver's crit damage, that's like Jalter's crit damage, it's not bad. But it's not exactly what you want. If you get that arts buff, not only are you going to increase the damage of your NP, but you also increase your NP gain. So in like say a brave chain, like an arts brave chain, you're going to be more easily able to loop your NP with those arts cards, and that's kind of what you want. You want to be able to keep getting your NP back as an art servant. We'll talk about some of the issues with the NP in a second, but getting this arts buff does drastically help out with her ability to loop. And then obviously 50% NP damage is absurd. Like, that's so rare. NP damage as like a buff is generally anywhere from like 13% to like 30%. It usually doesn't get much higher than that. So the fact that she can give herself 50% NP damage for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown is absurd. It greatly buffs up her damage. Now, also, thankfully, if you didn't know as a newer player, different buff types multiply into each other, so that attack buff on her second skill will multiply into either the arts buff or the NP damage buff on this skill to give her actually more damage. So I am thankful that they didn't throw like a random 50% attack buff in there, because that kind of would have been also an L to get. I mean, it would have been nice for your damage, but you'd still prefer the arts or the NP damage. But that's why I say it's a bit wacky, because you can use the crit damage. It's not bad, especially because she is an assassin. She could probably front her own stars. But the issue is that just getting the arts buff or the NP damage buff is just going to help you out a lot more. More so the arts buff, in my opinion, because again, that's going to allow you to kind of get your NP back turn after turn, or at least assist in your ability to loop. But that's why I think it's a bit odd. Thankfully, all of the effects last 3 turns, and it's only on a 5-turn cooldown. So it's not some like crazy absurd skill that lasts for like, I don't know, like a 10-turn cooldown or something absurd. So you have to wait a really long time. It's really not a detriment, but it's definitely weird. Then we have her NP, and this is kind of what I've been dancing around. So her NP only has 1 hit, so you're really not going to be genning a whole lot of NP back, because you really can't. If you don't know, the whole way you refund NP is that your NP has numerous hits on it. And so what you want to try to do is kill the enemy in one of the first few hits, because then all the extra hits get overkill and they gen extra NP with each additional hit. So if you have like a 10-hit NP and the first 3 hits kill the target, those next 7 hits still hit and gen extra NP because of the overkill. And unfortunately, Corday can't do that. She only has 1 hit. There is like no option for overkill. So that's really unfortunate. Thankfully, the effects on the NP are pretty good. She removes any dodges off the enemy, which is kind of nice, but she has the Pierce Invincibility. I guess that Pierce Invincibility is supposed to kind of make up for when that doesn't work, because there are enemies that have like dodge buffs that are unremovable in certain boss fights. So I probably would have rather her had like Sure Hit or something, but again, I appreciate that she has both, because there will be times when you'll want to fire your NP and you don't have the Pierce Invincibility up, so then you can use this, right, to get around dodges. So it's nice that she has 2 ways to get around it and kind of cover each other. She also just flat out ignores defense, which if you guys have been peeping the streams over on Twitch, which is linked down in the description down below, there were a ton of bosses that had big beefy defense, and when you have a servant that can just bypass defense, and you don't have to worry about that at all, it is super convenient, and I love it when servants have that on them. But does that mean that Charlotte Corday is a bad servant? Definitely not. Especially because she is a free 2-star that you can get NP5, you know, at no cost of your own. I mean, as long as you have enough friend points, I guess that's really the only cost to you. And a bit of your time and sanity. I guess that also is another charge for Charlotte Corday. But overall, I think it's worth it, especially for you new players that don't have somebody like Shiki as your single target assassin. You could also just use Hasana the 100 Personas, but people don't seem to really want to use her. I don't know why. Public service announcement, she's also very good as a single target arts, you know, assassin. Like, she's very good. But look, I get it. You want to use Charlotte Corday because she's got big old fat titties, okay? I understand. Because, I mean, she was one of the first servants I leveled up as soon as I got my JP account, because I was like, man, I want to use Big Titty Lady as my assassin. And if you look at the NP damage chart, I mean, considering that she's at NP5, she's more like middle of the pack. when compared to some of the other like 4 stars and 3 stars. Although you also got to keep in mind those 3 stars are probably NP5 as well. So it's not like her damage is exceptional, but it's not bad either. I mean, especially if you get that NP damage buff, that definitely does skyrocket her damage up a bit. But you should definitely level her up. She's not bad. Even if you're a long-time player, you can get some use out of her as a single target assassin that bypasses invincibility, removes dodges, pierces defense. It's just very useful to have something like that in your back pocket with just that much utility in them. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think of Charlotte? I know all the simps are coming out for this one, because when I asked what's the next bronze servant we should talk about, it was like, do my boy Jason or do the girl Charlotte? So it was the bros versus the simps. So I guess we'll talk about Jason next. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.